All right, everyone, a Merry Christmas, a Happy Yule, Happy Hanukkah, Merry Kwanzaa, Festive Festivus, etc. Whatever you happen to be celebrating today. For a lot of people, it's basically, I want some presents and good food day. That's sort of what we're doing here. Of course, I've got the festive decor and stuff. I'm not a Christian, so it's not Jesus is the reason for the season mode here. I will be cooking up a storm today. I made deviled eggs the other day. There's still a few left over, so that's a morning aperitif. And Liz is getting mighty impatient to open her gift, just to be clear. I think she'll like it. I wanted to do something a little bit different, though, this Christmas. Oh, by the way, Christmas clanks. I felt that was festive and appropriate. And I've got a brand new brick of fucking coffee to open later, so it's sniffy time too. I'll be caffeinating throughout the whole day considering how much I have to cook. It's gonna be great. Ham and cabbage, nice big chunks of carrot, cranberry sauce, of course, squishy squash. I make it extra good. You can boil it or roast it. I don't really notice the difference myself. Some people swear there is one. Celebratory caffeine. You can't go wrong with that. And I'm well rested. Baby slept through the whole night. I wanted to do my top picks for the top 10 news stories of the year. Just to recap, because I find a lot of times something major happens. Something that's literally landmark SCOTUS decision, major political intrigue, the outbreak of a war. And within a few months, people don't even remember that it happened. Because people's attention span has been compromised by the digital era. We have more information available than ever. But now it comes in so fast that a person can only focus on a minuscule amount of it. So people tend to break apart into a million different niches and a million different little tribes that focus on one thing over the other. I went back through my video list for the year. And I was focusing on, some of the stories and sort of refreshing my mind about them. And I figured I would do a top 10 list of the most noteworthy stories for the year. Now, my list will differ from yours, of course. I find different things to be different levels of important, and other people will definitely disagree. You might get mad. I left your story off. How dare I? There are a few honorable mentions. Honorable mention, J6 Committee. Not because the J6 Committee didn't come with a preconceived outcome. It was predetermined. We already knew what was going to happen. But because it landed with such a thud that within 24 hours, barely anyone's even talking about it other than some craptoids on Twitter. That was a funny one. But it doesn't quite make the cut. Lots of great stuff happening this year. Positive things, negative things. Of course, from the analytic perspective, at least, you get something to talk about that's not completely boring. Like, the recent omnibus bill doesn't make the cut either, just because it's like, okay, the Uniparty got together to screw MAGA Republicans and progressives alike by passing a bloated $1.7 trillion spending bill. But they do that every fucking election cycle. They always use the lame duck period as an opportunity to pile it full of pork. Billions and billions of dollars worth of it in this case. Number 10. The 10th most important story of the year. This is from back in January. Joe Rogan's Spotify battle. Now, why would this be particularly important? Of course, in the end, months later, Joe Rogan did overcome Spotify's attempted censorship. Mostly. Some of his episodes still aren't up. The shrieking freak out of the leftoids that were there, Neil Young, etc. They've basically all come back to the platform because they realized how many millions of dollars they weren't getting. And of course they're greedy. The whole point was they wanted to try to pressure Spotify to remove Joe Rogan, or at least rebuke him, over the fact that he said naughty things. He was being politically incorrect. He was spreading, I think it was specifically over medical misinformation. In the end, it's a good thing they didn't shit-can him because it turns out that much of what he was saying has been corroborated in the subsequent year. Congrats to Joe Rogan. You decided not to back down. Spotify, as a major corporation, so not necessarily something I outright respect, to their credit, they didn't bend to the whims of other people there, even if it was entirely because Joe Rogan's pulling in 100 times more money than fucking Neil Young could ever pull into the platform. Imagine you sign up for Spotify, you're like, man, I need a binge of that soft rock of the 70s, man. It's really what's going to get me going. It's like, you're from the VH1 generation or something if you're thinking of that. Number 9, arguably higher than this, but I didn't know exactly where to put it. The Bruen decision. This is back in June. Of course, the Bruen decision effectively nullifies all gun control in the United States pending reconsideration of literally thousands of state and federal level cases across the country. In most cases, those have gone in the direction of being more pro-gun. You still have holdouts. Rhode Island, of course, a judge there, I think last week, ruling that their magazine restrictions were helpful and pragmatic for public safety and therefore were constitutional. That will be appealed. In fact, I think it already has been. No reasonable court looking at the construct of Bruen is going to say that anything like that existed up until the end of the 1800s at earliest. Well, then there's no long-standing U.S. tradition for that gun control, ergo under Bruen's decision-making, it's unconstitutional. This decision is one of the major bellwether SCOTUS decisions of this century so far. It's up there with guns. It's up there with Heller versus D.C., 2006, I think. McDonald, Chicago, 2008, I believe. It's right up there. It really gives us an opportunity to expand the understanding of the Second Amendment back towards its original intent. Of course, we've gotten away from that in the wake of things like the NFA. Number 8, Hunter Biden's phone content. Now, this is another one in the context of the Twitter files that people probably should go back and revisit. And I made a video on a topic on it at the time. This was back in the middle of the year, in July. 4chan got a hold of a bunch of Hunter Biden phone content. It had been paired with the laptop and finally released to people, quite belatedly. What's interesting about this is that they were able to corroborate on the recipient's end that some of the material was indeed verifiably real. Much like with Hunter Biden's emails, therefore it was a major thing. But what happened? Legacy media at the time was largely still pretending that the whole thing was a Russian disinfo psyop, and so they didn't talk about it. Perhaps people need to dig back through those 4chan threads right now and tie them in with the Twitter files, because methinks that there is a little bit of a link between them. It was big at the time. Number 7, the Nordstream pipeline sabotage. Now, this was back in September, and at the time, I said, we don't know who the hell did this. Everyone's saying that it was Russia, and I remained very skeptical because it didn't really make sense. If you already control the pipeline and you can shut off the gas, you can use it as economic leverage over all of Europe. So why would you bomb it and then take that card off the table, unless you intended to go full total war and you knew you'd be a pariah anyway, which Putin so far has held off doing. Again, my prediction in retrospect turns out to be entirely the case because the British have looked into it now and determined there ain't no evidence that the Russians did it. They don't have a clue who did it. It was within the means of any actor that had a green water naval capability. There's like 100 nations in this world that could have pulled off exactly what happened with the Nord Stream pipeline. Again, though, there is no corroboration specifically of who done it. So it remains an open-ended question. That open-endedness makes it disproportionately important because at any given time, of course, some actor, including the Russians themselves, could find some tangential shred of evidence and push some more warmongering. Number 6, Kanye's Meltdown. I am going to label it a meltdown. He has disappeared off the radar since he effectively committed career suicide. Losing a bunch of deals, half his net worth, etc., although he's still phantasmagorically wealthy. When Kanye goes on Alex Jones and InfoWars and Tim Pool, etc., and he's showing up with Milo and Fuentes, actually, and starts rambling about Jewish people, you knew that a good time was going to be had. At the very least, it was briefly amusing, although, again, it's really in the wake of that, there's not a whole lot going on. Now, Milo leaves, appears to have been fired from that position. It's just a freak show. Again, I'll reiterate, I don't believe that Kanye should be debanked and shit because he has edgy political views, and I have sympathy for him on that end, although maybe less because, you know, he can still buy a small city, to be clear, with his net worth. He's massively wealthy. Recent update. Apparently. Update, breaking news about Kanye's October meltdown. Apparently there's over $1 billion of shoes, actually, that carry his brand that can no longer be sold because they're in a legal gray area where the contract has been severed. The shoes have been created. They are owned by the company, but the company can no longer sell them. So now they're going to have to take a loss of over $1 billion fucking dollars, just to spite Kanye West. Very interesting. I think he gets the upper hand in the end on that one. Number 5, the Mar-a-Lago raid in August. Yes, The FBI raiding a former president's home on spurious, trumped-up charges, wink wink, that began to be hyperbolically analyzed by everyone with Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah, I'd say that's an important story. It was an escalation even beyond what happened to fucking Rudy Giuliani or Roger Stone. By the way, they're both free men right now, so apparently they didn't do too much that was wrong. Giuliani is still getting abused, of course, by the state of New York trying to take his law license away, but he's in his 80s. Trust me, he doesn't give a fucking shit. He can write up a 50-page pamphlet, put it on KDP on Amazon, and probably clear 6 figures. He's got it made. He don't care. He's still America's mayor, remember? You all branded him that. The Mar-a-lago raid was a farce. It was entirely abusive. Apparently, they didn't find anything too juicy because even their own official report was like, well, we think that Donald Trump basically just kept these as trophies and genuinely considered them his. We found no evidence that he gave anything to anyone improperly. Well, there goes your fucking case with the raid. You shouldn't have conducted it in the first place. Number 4, the invasion of Ukraine. That's back in February. This is a Cold War-esque escalation between East and West, tension-wise. And that brings us right back to basically the 1970s at maybe one of the less violent moments. That's still, by the way, not a great place to be. Yes, the invasion of a sovereign country by its nuclear neighbor has really reconfigured, I think, the power dynamic in Europe too. And it's affecting, and I can see it here, I'm in the Netherlands, it's affecting the political system too. You have, and this was predicted many years ago, it's Weimar-esque. You now have the rise of groups that are more Russophobic, you could term it that, more supportive of Ukraine, of European like pan-nationalism and stuff, like the EU, pro-EU people. That's becoming more vigorous, and also outside of that, both an anti-war left and populist right that don't want to fuck around and find out. It's beginning to crack apart the political institutions of Europe. Part of it is due to economics. Of course, fuel costs are sky high, and there are people that are being told to turn down the thermostat so they have to go and buy a couple more blankets. Wonder if the Ukrainians are going to start mass-producing woolen blankets for the people of Europe. It'd probably be a good niche industry. You might want to consider putting up some more textile mills. Just saying. Number 3, the Twitter files, which is still ongoing now. I don't know how many releases there will be. I believe there will be at least a few more, though, because Matt Taibbi, he did say, well, pay attention to this channel and also these others, Barry Weiss, Schellenberger, etc., for more updates. So I think there will be more releases. The fact that the U.S. government's bureaus, including apparently, ostensibly the CIA now, decided to coerce a private business into removing lawful material by U.S. users, using taxpayer money and paying millions of dollars to Twitter. They leaned on Meta, Google's mention. Apparently, actual internet service providers too, Verizon, etc., their mention, is a spiraling scandal of massive import. The only reason why the entire nation's not up in arms about it is because we've become so hyper-politicized that the legacy media and big tech, which were in bed with the bureaus doing this, have all effectively said, well, we're just doing our job fighting the evil Russians. We're just doing our job fighting hate speech. Of course, it goes well beyond that. If you look at the internal messages, you'd know that. But a lot of people won't. If they're not on Twitter, they're not seeing that. They're seeing the analysis by CNN, which whitewashes it. Number 2, the FTX Superscandal starts in November, still ongoing. The collapse of FTX with Sam Bankman-Fried. It looks like his girlfriend has flipped on him, so she'll get the slap on the wrist. He may actually do hard time. He may actually, even though his parents, I guess, posted his bond somehow by leveraging their house, even though it was $250 million and their house is worth $4 or $5 million, I think. I don't know exactly how bond works in the United States. I have a feeling that if you were poor, that wouldn't work. Hey, I got a $500,000 bond here. I need to cover it. What am I going to use as collateral? Well, I've got my car. It's worth like $4,000. It'd be a similar scenario, by the way, as far as the amount that's being posted versus the bond. Apparently, people think he'll be able to make the notes good and that a bail bondsman actually decided to absorb the cost or the court didn't care. He may flee. He may Epstein himself. Again, still ongoing. the involvement politically with FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, other people there, in donating almost exclusively to the Dems and to uniparty Republicans like Murkowski, Collins, Romney, literally on the list, should be worrying to people. It shows the uniparty for what it really is, ties into the budget that they just passed, and to the midterm results. And number one, the biggest story of the year, excuse me, biggest story of the year, Donald Trump is in for 2024. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, who gives a damn? Donald Trump is boring now. Yeah, I mean, he's been kicked off of every legacy tech site other than Twitter and refuses to use that, so you're hearing less from him. I wonder why. This is still of high import. He is the presumptive nominee at this time. Nobody else is announced. He's the front runner regardless of what happens. He will probably be nominated as the Republican nominee. The real story will start next year, when it becomes clear that Donald Trump is probably going to be nominee, assuming that they're not crazy enough to actually indict him a la J6 or something. Then you've got a real big problem for all the other tech sites, because they're literally banning the main party candidate of one of the two main parties. It's going to look really politically lopsided if they don't let him back on their platforms. Another blow struck against censorship. In the name of public interest and pragmatism, they may have no choice but to back off. Well, people will say, well, if this evil insurrection fomenter can be back on the site, what about this person who just posted a breastfeeding pic on Facebook 2 years ago and got taken off because Zuckerberg was reminded that he was a test tube synth, a cyborg or something, who never got to suck on the teat. It'll be very, very interesting. I would note as well, it's a slap in the face of the Uniparty, the same hated group of McConnellites that we've been dealing with now for years. There's an open attempt right now, a real one, to shake up the party leadership structure. That's partially predicated on Trump saying, look, I'm back in, I'm with you, you can be with me too. It's basically, if Trump hadn't gotten in, if he had said, no, MAGA's over, fuck you, I'm retired, I'm going to Brazil or something, I think things would be working a little bit differently. You'd have a different result in the midterms if he had come out last year and said, look, I'm an old man now, I just want to go golfing, leave me alone. Things would be politically and socially very, very different. That one decision that he made shook up U.S. politics more than anything else in years, to be clear. People aren't giving him the credit that he deserves for being the great shaker-upper. See what's happening with the border right now and the, of course, throwing under the bus of the entire nation by Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney, and others. Yeah, I wonder if that's going to play into the hands of a return of MAGA, completely abandoning the southern border, doing more warmongering, something that Trump was reluctant to do, although not entirely absent from his non-peace dove career as president, of course. Let's give credit where credit's due, though. It's better than what we're suffering with now. So yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. A little bit of a rant video. I'm only doing one today. I probably won't do anything else unless there's like really grade A news or something. We're going to do present opening. I'm going to cook food. I'm going to putter around. Stores aren't open, so I can't get my normal walk-in. That's all good. Opportunity to clean the house a little bit more. When you have a child, by the way, it's all about those little moments where you can get a little bit of extra domestic work done because your time to vacuum the floor or load the dishwasher shrinks a little bit. It's bearable. It's fun. I would recommend, your couple or something, you probably should have a kid. Let's bring more cuties into the world, more adorable things, things that aren't fucking messed up like the news tends to be. The world could use a little bit more joy. This Christmas, go fuck. That's about all. Peace out.